In the military, you're given a uniform and instructed on how to do things and when to do them. But what happens when the cadence fades and you're no longer wearing that uniform? I'm KP, and I started this podcast to fill that silence with direction and to provide overall support for my beloved military family. Welcome to the Morning Formation. This episode is brought to you by Act Now Education. Thank you for joining us today, folks. Today we're honored to have a first-generation American combat Army veteran who's also the author of an inspirational best-selling book called American Dream. A book about overcoming personal and career obstacles utilizing discipline, resilience, endurance, adaptability, and mentorship to meet success. In addition, she's the founder and very first veteran-owned luxury perfume line, Triangle Fragrance. Miss Magda Khalifa, thank you for joining us on the Morning Formation podcast today.
Great to be here. Thank you so much, KP.
So let's get things started and just learn a little about you and your background. Can you tell us where you're originally from and describe what was your childhood like?
Sure. So I grew up in the New York City area and, had a pretty normal childhood growing up. Went to college and I got married young and had a career in information technology in the area, throughout the area.
Right on. And so when you joined the military, what was your MOS? And when you served in Iraq, what type of work did you do?
So I joined right after, witnessing September 11th attacks in New York City. Within 6 months, I had enlisted, and I was part of the United States Army Reserve. And my MOS was, at the time, it was 38 Alpha. It's been reclassed to 38 Bravo since. So civil affairs specialist. So we were, at the time, again, this was, back in 2002. So at the time it was the only reserve unit under Special Operations Command.
Right on. And at any point, did you serve in active duty?
Yes. So I served 2 tours in Iraq in 2004 and then went back in 2006 to 2007.
And 2004, I just want to know for my own personal, what part of Iraq were you in? Because I was in 2004 as well, and I was up in northern Iraq in Mosul. Where were you located?
So the bulk of my time was in the Bakuba area, although being part of civil affairs team, we traveled a lot. So we did spend some time, up in Tikrit, ran missions, Caldwell, Fob Caldwell, that was out by the border, the eastern border, and just a bunch of different areas, but we stayed more north than south.
Right. Yeah, I didn't typically make it down to Baghdad often. I was more near the Syrian border and up by Turkey quite a bit, and I guess Kurdistan and around those areas. And I understand that when you began writing your book, American Dream, when you came back from Operation Iraqi Freedom, which you also mentioned is when you started struggling with the transition and coming back into the civilian world. Did you start a journal at that time? And if so, how did you have the presence of mind to start doing so?
So the book didn't come out until I had been back almost a decade. So no, I was not journaling. I was surviving day to day. It was, so it was May of 2007 when I separated from active duty and essentially had to figure things out. At that time, which wasn't that long ago, really, 14 years, but they didn't, the resources that exist now did not exist then. So it was very challenging for me to try to figure out how to transition. I thankfully, I was functional. I was fortunate enough that a colonel who had retired from the reserve unit I was a part of had, was working as a contractor. So he got me a job working as a contractor for the Navy. So that was good. I had a steady paycheck and, I was able to get a small condo and, at least go to work in a place that I felt somewhat connected with others because they were either in uniform, active duty Navy, or they were contractors like myself who had served as well. So at least I had that going for me. and that gave me a little bit of stability to start the transition process, if you will. So I did that. I worked as a contractor for Defense Department for about 5 years before I started my first business. But I will say, so while I was functional, personally, I was isolating myself, and I was very disconnected from a lot of people, even from other veterans, because I was an Army soldier veteran in a Navy town, and even within that world, there were differences that it was hard, and I guess maybe being a female soldier as well, who had been in combat operations at that time, all of these elements, it just kind of it was hard to really connect with people, so because there weren't many of us around, so separating from the pack was challenging, and trying to obviously anybody who's served at war like yourself, you come back home, your priorities have been realigned for sure, and you've changed as a person, not in a bad way, but it's a big adjustment for sure for anybody back then and today.
Most definitely. And I can tell you that when I came back and I stepped off the plane, and I was stationed with 25th in Hawaii at the time, I certainly felt like a different person, and I didn't want to really admit it, and I didn't want to believe it. It took me like over 10 years to finally realize, and it took a lot of struggle to realize that I am different, and there are some things that were that I brought back with me, and I probably should have taken care of. When I came back, they make you go through those processes of seeing a counselor and talking to this person and signing out here and everything else. I think it was called SRP, and I skipped all that. Like, I purposely just skipped that. Being a lieutenant, I kind of had that authority to do so. But when you did decide to write the book, did you find it therapeutic?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just it's kind of blown away that they have counselors now. We didn't even have that. We had a week of sign this paperwork. Okay, go get your eyes checked or whatever, and you're done. So it's interesting that they have counselors now. But yeah, I think anybody who writes, whether they publish or not, anybody who takes the time to put thought to paper or type it up, or even speak it into an app that records your voice. Anytime you get it out of you, it is a therapeutic or cathartic, in many ways. So, regardless of what it is that you're writing about, because usually it's born from some thoughts that are, in your mind. So yes, personally I did. And in the book, I actually captured some of that, some of what I call epiphanies, because as I wrote, I was discovering more things, which was great. And I was pretty transparent about that with the reader, so that they can kind of realize, wow, okay. I hope that they take that away, that was kind of really happening real time, which I thought was pretty powerful, because it really emphasizes the cumulative points of the book, about how powerful, Freedom Triangle, which I introduced towards the end of the book, how powerful that Freedom Triangle is.
Yeah, I transitioned out around the same time that you did in 2007, and I wouldn't put too much emphasis on the counselors. They were more there and just kind of like a whitewash, check the block type thing. But yeah, I understand what you're saying 100% with the resources not being there when you transitioned out, versus like now you can connect with so many other veterans out there through Clubhouse, through LinkedIn. And, I always tell people, and I joke, that the hottest thing on the market, social media wise, when I got out was MySpace. And, nobody knows what that is anymore. When you got out of the military, I want to talk about your transition, and I want to dissect and separately talk about your career transition and your personal transition. I heard in another podcast you talk about your depression and everything from the experience of war, from the burn pits to the water that we drank over there. And that kind of hit home for me, because I remember being out by the Syrian border, and they had the Lister bags hanging up out in the middle of the desert. And I remember I opened them up, and there was just dirt and all kinds of stuff in there. Can you speak in more detail about your mental and personal transition from the military to a more civilian lifestyle?
Yeah. So okay. So the main takeaway is I didn't know. Like a lot of us did not know, did not realize that a lot of the health issues we were experiencing, be them, how we were feeling, in our mind or physically, right? A lot of those issues, really, the root cause of it were the exposures that we collectively have had. So even if you didn't deploy, there's a good chance, just by serving in your job in the military, doing what you do, you're exposed to so many, toxic, um, you know, fumes and just everything that you're exposed to that affect your DNA and affect your thinking, right? So we don't know what we don't know, but once you do know, you can take actions to try to correct it, before it gets too late. And that's not just something in the military, it's anybody that works in an environment where there are a lot of hazards and toxins, but we didn't really talk about it back then. Now there's a much more acknowledgement and awareness throughout the veteran community, which is a good thing, because now when you know what some of the problem is, you can tackle it. You could take the right steps to get there. So certainly, you're going from, like you said, being out there and like looking at the blister bags and everything. And I mean, we were exposed to a lot of bad stuff. Would I do it again? Yes. Yes. I mean, to have served and to have been part of the fighting force when our country needed it most. I mean, there's nothing that could come close to that. And, it's invaluable. But now knowledge is power. And, as a part of when I was getting through my decade of, I call it decade of darkness, in the book, where I was playing really small and being reclusive and existing and not really living. One of the high points was getting involved, working with veterans nonprofits to help warriors who, in my opinion, were worse off than I was, because it always felt good to give back. Anyway, in the process of doing that, I came across an organization that really focused on the health issues for the veterans that we're talking about right now. They identified the root cause, and they were able to help veterans through non-traditional methods, meaning not surgeries and pills, which seemed to have been like the only answer for, through the VA back in the day, right? Which, I definitely kept away from those types of solutions. And so I learned everything I could about it and started applying those things in my life and speaking about it to other veterans to help them realize, hey, you can push through. Like it's there's nothing wrong with you. You did what you did. There's nothing wrong with you. You just have all these other factors working against you. So let's start fixing those factors, and then you can heal and your mind will heal. And I mean, I'm testament to, focus, the result of focusing on that and turning your life around, turning your mind around 180 degrees. Like the zest I have for life right now was absent for, almost a decade, and it's night and day, and there's no going back now. So, it's so important to share that knowledge with our community and help them realize that if they pay attention to these things and tackle these things, life isn't going to be so horrible, transitioning wise or ever after. You can beat that narrative, but it's so important that, we speak about this, especially within our community of veterans.
Now, Magda, great anecdote there. Now, I have to ask, for those veterans who are currently in their time of darkness and are struggling and don't necessarily have a community or a mentor to back them, or even have a passion like you did helping veterans, what can people do to find the light at the end of their tunnel, their time of darkness? And what helped you discover your what pushed you to discover your love for helping veterans, and how can other people follow that same philosophy to find their light at the end of the tunnel?
Sure, great question. So obviously trust is very important for veterans, right? We all kind of view things a little differently, and it's hard to sometimes listen to folks who hadn't walked in our boots, so to speak, or had the same experiences. So one thing that exists now that didn't exist previously is kind of what we're doing right now, podcasts. There are so many podcasts out there run by wonderful veterans like yourself, KP, and that really shed light on these issues. And I find that a lot of veterans are tuning in to whoever resonates with them. And it's not just veteran speakers. I mean, there's podcasts on the civilian side, sure, that are absolutely, powerful, bringing attention to these things in sound bites that are easily digestible, so that if someone hears something, while they're so busy working and doing everything that they're doing, they could just tune in, listen to something, and take action on it, and inquire about it. So we have a much more connected world right now, which is really important. But I think the emphasis is on the leaders, those of us who have been through difficult, dark times, who have pushed through. We need to be able to articulate that more. And why that's important, it's because, again, that trust factor. Because if you're a veteran right now who's struggling, well, now you have examples of veterans who, modern day veterans, right, who have been through probably what you're going through, and they have found their way forward. So, it's a good thing what we have going on right now. And, I certainly believe, veterans should share their experiences, write a book, go through the process as well. That's part of history, and it captures perspective from ours, from the ground truth, from the boots on the ground. I remember when I was in college, I would read books about Vietnam veterans, from people who were there, and it fascinated me. And they weren't that much older than me, 20 years or whatnot, but they really provided those, little granular perspectives that maybe a general purpose history book didn't, provide. And there was credibility there. And that was invaluable because that helped answer a lot of things for me. And it built that trust, So I think we just need to capture and share, ultimately.
Yeah, I can definitely identify with what you're saying with that. I really wish that when I got out of the military in 2007, I wish I wouldn't have tried so hard to step away and not just turn the page to the next chapter. I literally ripped the chapter out of the book and took any type of item that I had that resembled the military, and I put it in a box and just threw it over in the closet somewhere. And some of it actually got thrown away. And here I am years later coming back to the table again, and a lot of it was because I really lost a lot of friends and family that I had from back home. Did you also experience the same thing as well? The separation of experience and understanding of the world being just? Do you feel like when you came back that you had a difficult time maintaining or building upon those relationships that you had with friends and family?
Yeah, I definitely changed. And I know, I take full responsibility now, I realize, because it was probably really hard for friends and family and people who knew me prior to having gone to war to see how I changed and not understand why. So, forgiveness granted all around. I probably was not, at my best at that time. So naturally you separate from people that don't get you, and you try to find people that get you. But what I was finding is, between a combination of a lot of the other warriors, they were still serving, they were still going overseas, so had that disconnect because obviously communications wasn't, even when you're deployed, it doesn't matter. Even today, communications get cut all the time and stuff, and there's only so much you can communicate with, from a security standpoint, of course. So everybody was just so involved. Everybody was separated. It was hard to find that family, that circle of trust again. And, and within that, sometimes you thought you found it within, other veterans that maybe you didn't serve together, but they were veterans too, and they served at the same time you did, but in other parts. And, which is natural. I mean, betrayals occur, or, just because you're a veteran doesn't, that we have bad veterans too. And there are people who, they're just bad human beings. And, when they betray that trust, that's unfortunate. So it's a challenge all around, One thing I can say is, as I've evolved, as I've grown, as I've, improved my health, myself, my state of being, and my outlook in life, what I've done automatically or naturally and also consciously is I am glad to say that I am integrating better and meeting people from the civilian pool that I know when I came back, I probably did not really care to have anything to do with them because all that mattered was the battlefield and service. And that was it. I was thinking really with a very narrow mindset. And, I get it. At that time, yeah, it made sense. But, I left, I don't know, mid 30s when I got out of active duty and, plan of peaking over 100 years, so like you have to make new friends and make new connections as well, like if you just limit yourself, and that's the problem. I did it. So that's why I'm bringing attention to it. Like if you just keep yourself just within a community, you're going to be limited to the growth you can have as a person. And you may need growth beyond your tribe of comfort where everybody gets you, Plus, you may be subject to groupthink that's never healthy, that impedes upon your critical thought, your artistry, be it, whatever your contribution to the world is beyond your time in service, Because if you think about it in terms of, hey, I'm going to go join the military at 18, get out in 20 years, retire. Okay, and then what? 38 years old, at that point, you're young. 38, if you don't have a plan for the future, or a dream for the future, that's when you find yourself stuck in that vortex, living in the past. It's just like Al Bundy, right? Remember Al Bundy and Married with Children? He was like always living or reliving in the heyday of like when he was like, scored the winning touchdown on the football team. Like get past it, go beyond. Like some people just do that with their lives. And look, no judgment, but I'm just saying if you're going to cap yourself out at that point, and if you're not going to continue to grow, well, you're limiting your happiness and your peace. Because I personally believe now I realize it's so important to constantly be growing. I feel it's especially as a veteran, and this is my opinion, that you can continue serving in your own unique way, even if you're not in uniform, and you could create the way that you want to do that. So it's a mindset shift. But I remember a time when I wasn't thinking like that. So I'm hoping someone in your audience, maybe if they're still serving now or they've gotten out recently or a while back, maybe they start looking at the fact like, hey, I have the rest of my life. We were spared, we came back, and what's that reason, and finding it and taking action on it is very rewarding.
That's really impactful what you're saying, because I always tell people that, you got to believe that you were put on this world for greatness, and, you deserve more than what you have, and to fight and to always work and stay motivated. And something you mentioned earlier, talking about connecting with veterans with what we have today versus what we didn't have, back in 2007, that actually is why I started this podcast. To me, this is therapeutic. I live in one of the biggest cities in the United States, Los Angeles, and yet I feel alone. And so, but when I'm on Clubhouse and I'm connecting with folks like you, it's nice to hear a lot of the things that you're saying. Almost everything that you're saying is exactly what I agree with, because I've been there before. And I've gotten feedback from some of my listeners before based off something that I said or my guest said, where they said, man, when that was mentioned, I felt a lump in my throat. Like I felt like I wanted to almost cry. And that's, to me, what's most important about us reaching out to each other and connecting with each other, is so that we can talk and we can also identify with our own experiences. And I can't believe that sometimes I'm talking to people and I'm just like nodding my head thinking, yeah, that's absolutely amazing. And that's really impactful. And everything that you just mentioned is things that exactly as I would say them. And, you mentioned your transition a couple of minutes ago, and I'd like to talk about what your career transition experience was like when you separated from the Army. What was it like to translate your skills into the civilian world?
So since I transitioned for the first 5 years after leaving active duty and coming back from war. I was working as a defense contractor, so it was probably the easiest point to transition my skills because, especially specifically because the first few years of that, first almost 4 years of it, as a civil affairs, a person who did civil affairs in the Army, I was helping build the Navy's new civil affairs team. So it was very relevant, very extremely relevant. So that was good. When I made the transition from employee and from defense contractor to being a business owner, a solopreneur working for myself, that was a different type of transition, but not unlike anybody who has gone from being an employee to being, in business for themselves, self-employed. So, but at that point, it was so clear, like I knew what I wanted to do, and no one made me do this, and I wanted to do it, and it was just, that part was never a problem. I guess career-wise, I've never really struggled with career. What I've struggled with, well, the health issues and personal relationships, career-wise, I've been fortunate, I believe, like, it's never been a struggle. I've always figured that part out. No one's ever handed anything to me. I've worked for it or earned it, which is fine. But that part hasn't been the challenge for me. So to answer your question in terms of one of your listeners who may be going through the process right now, so a lot of veterans, they tend to focus on what it is that I did from the standpoint of skills, okay? And what I encourage them to do is to look at it from the standpoint of leadership, because you can be taught a skill. Anyone that's coachable can learn new skills, but leadership is not something that comes very easily for a lot of people. And even if let's pick a simple scenario. Even if you join the military at 17 and served 4-year tour, or a 4-year enlistment, and you came out, okay, so you're 21 at that point, maybe 21 and a half. You are well ahead of your peer group at that point because of the leadership experience you've had. Let that sink in. You are well ahead of your peer group. So even if you don't have the college credits, or you were an 11 Bravo infantry, a grunt, right? How's that going to translate to the civilian world or whatnot? You have leadership skills. And that is so important because we need leadership in this world in every realm, and in business and in companies. Companies want that. They can teach you the skills. So don't ever feel hampered like, oh, my skills are not going to translate. They're not going to understand these kinetic skills that I have. That's not the focus. You're focusing on the wrong thing. Focus on your discipline, your ability to lead others, your ability to solve problems, your ability to be a self-starter. And in the absence of leadership or resources, you're able to get the job done. Those are the types of things that employers are going to be looking for. And those are the types of things that I believe are absolutely necessary if you're going to become self-employed, start a business. You need to have those traits because you can figure everything else along the way. You can get mentors to show you the shortcuts and learn and understand what you need to do, but you cannot teach those traits. Those come with experience. So I think all veterans, who have served a minimal amount of time, have a plethora of leadership experience, character, that they really have an edge over someone who has not been through that experience.
I definitely agree with you on that. When I was 24 years old, I was a lieutenant in Iraq. I was a platoon leader, of a transportation platoon. And there's not very many 24, 25-year-olds that could say that they were running missions outside of combat area, dealing with IEDs and complex ambushes and all the madness that we had to deal with. So the military definitely puts you ahead leadership wise. I guess the biggest challenge was when I got out, I was sitting across the table from recruiters that didn't understand how those skills translated. So right off the bat, I wanted to really get into medical sales And after each interview that I had, the number one thing that they said was, well, you don't have any sales experience. Well, maybe I didn't do a good job at translating those skills over somehow. I had a graduate degree that I just got out as a captain. I thought that I was gonna, have all kinds of jobs offered to me, and I ended up just having just one that was offered to me when it was all said and done, and I took it, and I was there for about a year. So definitely, I like what you're saying about the leadership part. Don't ever sell yourself short, because even if you were a squad leader or a assistant platoon sergeant or anything of any leadership, that's a lot more than your peer group had during that time. You are definitely ahead of your peer group. And Avi, did you have a question?
Yes. So KP, Magda, exactly what you guys are talking about. This marketability is a huge, crucial aspect of making the transition process easier. So Magda, other than leadership, what other aspects of the Army lifestyle and duties did you see coincide with aspects of the private sector that made transitioning easier?
Great question, Avi. So, my book, American Dream, Dream is an acronym, and it stands for the D, for discipline, then resilience, endurance, adaptability, and mentorship. And the first four, DREA, I think those are all, well, and the rest of the title is to succeed and win in life. Okay. So, those first four letters, I believe those skills associated with those letters, those characteristics are absolutely inherent to anyone who serves in the military. For sure, you're learning, you absolutely are executing on discipline. You may leave it when you get out, and that's on you, but it's there. So automatically, you have that ability to be disciplined and, to be able to show up, and that's half the battle. Okay, resilience. Resilience is so important because obviously when you're serving in the service, you go through some difficult, challenging times, and your ability to keep going. All right, that's huge. A lot of people who have not served get crushed the minute something bad happens. So you have that resilience, endurance. I mean, even if I'm just going back to that example of a 4-year enlistment, and you get in and you hate what you're doing and you hate the people you're working with, but you still show up and you do what you have to do, right? You have that endurance in you because you've weathered through it. Okay, going on deployment. Remember the first people who deployed to Iraq in 2002, who were, I remember, they were supposed to stay a year and they ended up staying 18 months. I mean, talk about endurance, right? 18 months away from your families and friends. That was before the deployments were streamlined. So you certainly have built up that endurance by your time in service. And adaptability. My goodness. I mean, I think it's being a veteran, we all know adaptability because you have to just, show up and adapt to the situation on the ground. And Murphy's going to be there and, the plan's going to change, fraggle, and you still march forth and complete mission. So you're adaptable. So when things like that pop up in your career or in your in the course of your entrepreneurship journey, it's like water off the duck's back. It just rolls right off of you because you're like, okay, whatever. You kind of come to expect it, and it doesn't mess with your mind the way it does for others who have not been tested and proven as much as you have already in such a short period of time. So you have all these superpowers coming out as a veteran.
Most definitely. And I can tell you that the number of battle drills that we did to deal with the IEDs, the complex ambushes, the vehicle breakdowns and everything, nothing ever happened to script. It was always thinking on your feet and adjusting and making it happen. But the beautiful thing was everyone had a baseline. Everyone understood security. Everyone understood boxing up. And that was after you got through and you were back on the fob. That was something to look back on as a leader and say, you know what? Yeah, that's why we train. And so I understand what you're saying. And I want to ask you, with the transitioning from leadership to leadership positions, what differences in work culture have impacted the way you approach problems and are treated as an Army veteran?
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I've been out for, 14 years. I haven't I mean, other than for drill, like I really haven't worn the uniform on a daily basis in 14 years, and that is a lengthy period of time. So I believe I've acquired a lot of other experience collectively that makes up the sum of who I am today, and I'm not sure if I'm answering your question correctly, so please let me know. But I think it's just an accumulation of all the things in your life, all the experiences, all the tests, all the setbacks that really build out inner confidence in yourself and your abilities. And that's huge. And I know as time continues, that will only continue to grow. And, I welcome the setbacks because I know I'm going to emerge from it stronger. It's going to, setbacks suck for a little while, but then you come out a better version of yourself. And if you're at a point in life where as time goes on and you continue to grow, you're becoming an even craftier version of yourself. That's awesome. And I'm grateful and blessed to finally be in that position where I am. I had that stagnant, not a lot of growth, period of life, that decade of darkness when I was existing but not really living. Now, now it's nonstop growth every single day. But I am also taking action to assure that there's that constant growth cycle. And it's intentional, and that's so important. And if you don't have that, you have to look, who are you surrounding yourself with? Reevaluate your priorities. If you're not seeking it, it's not necessarily going to come to you. So you have to seek it. And you do that by getting uncomfortable and putting yourself in positions where, you're not the smartest in the room. You're not the most experienced in the room. And that's how you grow and continue to grow.
Yeah, I definitely understand what you're saying. So the one thing is about the military as well is they put you in position of responsibility and accountability and leadership, and you don't always win. Like, nobody's perfect, and I'm not perfect. I've screwed up so many times, and I think what you're saying is every lesson is one to learn from, whether it be negative or positive. It's important to grow from that experience, and many times people focus on just being perfect, and that's not what it's about. It's about overcoming obstacles, learning from your leadership growth, and moving on from there. And the one thing that I love about your personality, Magda, is how 100% authentic you are. And I listened to one podcast where you spoke about, family issues that expanded after coming back from deployment. And I understand this concept because, I don't speak to some of my own family members, and it was hard to align myself with family and friends that I had in college and back home. And some of those small neglected embers that I had inside of me grew over time. And the largest shelf I felt like was my deployment. My deployment was kind of, out of everything I've been through my childhood, growing up and whatnot, the deployment, I guess, separated me even more. What suggestions do you have for veterans who also experience the same mental isolation with their own friends and families?
Absolutely. And I think many of us do in some way, to varying degrees. And here's the good news. I'll lead with the good news. Okay. There's two pieces. The first part is it's up to you if you're going to let that affect you. Okay. Meaning others can choose to hang on to whatever they want to. That's on them. You can't change them. You have to do you. Okay. So you have to make that choice first. Are you going to be enslaved to those relationships? Sometimes practicing limited association may be what it takes to create some time and space and to find that zone. Hey, maybe you just get together for the holidays and we don't talk about whatever, sports, politics, religion, whatever it is, but we love each other as family. Maybe that's the case. Okay. The second piece of good news is that you can find new people. I mean, 6 billion people in this planet, and I'm so grateful because the relationships I've built in recent years with people who are not blood family, who are not even veterans, we've become very close, and it's really opened up my horizons to realize that you can create your own tribe, and that's part of what I attempt to do with my brand as it grows and as I am going to be able to bring people onto my team, they're going to be my family by extension. I'm going to have responsibility to them as employees. And, it's going to be my job to inspire them and align them with the mission and goals of the company. And that is a tribe of its own. So if you, are stuck and feel isolated, find new people, find new connections. Like, trust me, you don't want a mirror image of yourself. Okay. It's good to, yes, you want folks that share values, the important things, but we're also human beings. And, this whole thing about being clones, and groupthink, that can be dangerous as well. So you just find that right area. But the whole point is, it's in your mind, first of all, if you're going to allow things to affect you. And then if you can put it in the proper context in your mind, you can find ways where it won't affect you as much. And then second, you can find new people to bring into your life. And that could be very rewarding. It could be in the form of mentors who feed your mind. It could be in the form of supporters, who bring positivity to you and what you're about. And so, there's just so many different areas, but there are a lot of people out there. But sometimes you have to go find them rather than sitting, waiting, hoping that they come to you. And a little caveat to that, you have to get out of the house. And, I'm thinking of myself when I was reclusive, Magda, for a good chunk, functional but reclusive. I didn't get out to be amongst people, to meet new people, because I was living in my mind and in the past. And, that thwarts your development and your growth. And again, think back to that, that visual, that 17, 18-year-old who goes in, serves for 20 years. What are you going to do for the rest of your life? Shoot, I'm almost 48. I wish I could be in that position of 38 again, because that would be an extra 10 years, of youth and vitality to really make the most of it. And life's just full of so many experiences, and you just have to really want it. Nobody can want it for you. And if you start adopting those types of mindsets and growth-minded mindset, the universe is going to feed it. It's going to bring you people and experiences, but you have to take the actions, and it starts with your commitment, intentional commitment to yourself, to get past that rut. Nobody can do that for you.
Very, very impactful stories there, Magda. I love how you correlate everything that you've been through to your current situation, and in a way that allows other people to learn from it as well. Very, very important. Now, we know that you have a fragrance that launched just before the pandemic. That couldn't have been easy. Triangle fragrance. We see you wearing the hat right now. Do you mind explaining to our audience what made you decide on the name Triangle Fragrance and what importance the brand has to you?
Absolutely, Abby. Thank you. So when I wrote my memoir, it published in October 2019, so a little shy of 2 years ago. And in the memoir, the real value, other than, there's history, there are lessons, there's self-help, but the real value is something I introduced to the world called Freedom Triangle, which is based on time freedom, health freedom, and mind freedom. So I realized not everybody reads books, and I wanted to, that's the framework that's going to help people. So I thought, if I had a physical product that can attract people to this notion of Freedom Triangle, I'll be able to help them through that. So fragrance came to mind, because fragrance could be for men, for women, could be available worldwide. And I wanted to cast a wide net and help as many people as I can. So that's Triangle Fragrance is inspired by Freedom Triangle. So that's the correlation with the name. So yes, I started this January 2020, and by November of that year, the 6 fragrances were introduced and manufactured and available, and have been selling since last year, along with a discovery set, and so people can sample all of them. And what is so nice about Triangle Fragrance, it is the first modern luxury fragrance line for men and women. So each of the 6 fragrances each one has its own triangle fragrance collector's card. And that card, it's beautiful, it's elegant, it's designed so that you could put it in your wallet, you could put it in your bathroom mirror, by the coffee maker, wherever you find most most helpful for yourself. And the statements on the card tie back to Freedom Triangle and to the fragrance and the scent itself. So that way, collectively, it's an experience. It's not just a pretty scent, it's not just a luxurious scent. So I'm really, really pleased with the whole collection and excited to continue to see it grow and blossom and for things to come in the future.
Magda, anyone out there interested in purchasing your book or purchasing any of the fragrances that you have, the 6 different fragrances, where can they find that?
Sure. So I tried to simplify it because I have a lot going on. For the book, if they go to AmericanDreamTheBook.com, it has links to Amazon and other areas other places they could purchase the book. If they're interested in the fragrance, they can go to trianglefragrance.com. And we also have authorized distributors, which are brick and mortar shops. I'm in the process of creating relationships with other brick and mortar shops across the country. So if anybody in your audience has a brick and mortar shop and they would like to carry Triangle Fragrance for their customers, please have them reach out.
Awesome. And for folks out there that would like to connect with you, what social media platforms do you use?
I have a presence in most of them, but really Instagram currently right now. It's at magda.khalifa.usa. I'm also on LinkedIn for those that are exclusively on LinkedIn, and Facebook as well. So between all 3 socials. I think I'm on Twitter too, but I don't use that one as much.
It's hard to manage all the different accounts. I understand. I'm on Twitter as well, but I think I have 3 followers and that's it. So that is pretty sad. But yeah, I use mainly 3 different social media platforms. And just to final things out, Magda, I'd like to ask you, what are the key takeaways from your journey that you would like for everyone to understand and know?
Sure. Well, everybody's journey is going to be different, but if I knew these things back in the day, maybe the long dark decade wouldn't have been a decade, right? So the first thing is you have to be intentional with what you want, and if you cannot even be truthful with yourself, if you cannot even make the time to write it down and read it out loud to yourself, okay? If you can't even get to that point, all right, it's not just going to magically happen. And you're going to let some great years go by where, yes, you could be a good person and have a job and pay your taxes and, be functional, but there's so much more in life, So just start with that commitment to be honest to yourself, and whatever it is that you want to achieve or get past, you can do it. Okay, that's for sure. I'm living proof of it, and like so many others as well. Number 2, mentorship. So getting back to DREAM, American Dream, the acronym, the M stands for mentorship. And I never really knew about mentors, before I joined the military. I knew some, veterans who I looked up to as mentors. I mean, they, just by having a relationship with them, they, shared their experiences and their views and whatnot. And that kind of helped me understand things. So I was able to ask them questions, So same thing applies, in life, in business, in anything you want to do. If you want to, excel in athletics, you're going to have coaches and you're going to have, mentors to help you with mindset part. Like Tim Grover, I was very fortunate to meet Tim Grover, who coached Kobe Bryant, Michael Jordan, a number of other, successful athletes, and he really is an amazing mentor, and I was very fortunate to spend some time with him and to be mentored by him. And of course, people can read his books and really understand the mindset of a champion. So you can find a mentor. They're probably out there on the internet. They probably have a YouTube or some sort of communications on social media. Read their books. Show up at their events. Plug in, connect with them. And there's so many out there, you just have to find the ones that really speak to you. And, learn from that. So that would be the second. First, the commitment. The second, the mentorship. And three, you just really want to do an inventory of who is in your life on a daily basis. Who are you listening to? And, if they're negative, if they're not feeding or otherwise supporting your growth and development, you may want to limit association with them. And it doesn't matter if they, maybe they birthed you, maybe they, maybe, it could be someone in your own close family, because what I'm learning, what I'm realizing too, there are fewer people that have positive, supportive family members. What I'm learning as I get older is, unfortunately, family can love you, but sometimes they're some of the biggest obstacles in your growth. And again, it may be a form of limited association that needs to take place, or a conversation, or whatever it may be. But if you are not surrounded with positivity, and it could be like the person you're married to as well, or in a relationship. It could be so many different ones. So if you're not in a positive, relationship with the five people that you interact with the most on a daily basis, and when I say interact, it could be on the phone with. It doesn't have to be face to face in person, but the five people who, whose words are influencing your mind, right? And you have to reevaluate that and maybe make some adjustments if you want to get past what might be hindering your growth and your happiness.
I definitely love the message, Magda. I did a lot of research on you, like listening to podcasts before this, and I thought to myself, I have to get this woman on my podcast as a guest, because I love the message. I love the product, the book that you have out. You're definitely a fighter, a mentor, and a true inspiration. And I really appreciate you giving us this time today to speak to you. It's an absolute honor. Avi, do you have anything to summarize or final things out?
Well, it'll be more of a comment here, Magda. I love how you, at every step of your journey, there was always something to learn from. And at each stage of your life that you've talked about with us, you can see the reflection of the lessons you've learned, the people you've tried to help, and everything you've worked towards, even in your fragrance line. And I think that is amazing and a perfect example of how learning lessons at each and every curve can lead to a lifetime of education and betterment.
Thank you, KP, and thank you, Avi. I really appreciate being here and connecting with you both.
Most definitely. The honor is all on this side of the microphones. Thank you so much, Magda. And for anyone else out there listening who's interested in connecting with Magda, I will put all that information down in the show notes, as well as where you can find her products and her book. And of course, if all else fails, you can find her book on Amazon, just like everything else that you can find. So definitely check it out. And hopefully it hits home for you. Hopefully it sends you the messages that she mentioned today, and there's the major key takeaways. I want to thank everyone for listening to the Morning Formation podcast today. As for Avi, Magda, and KP, we're out.